Hi, my name is Brittany, and this is my channel, Pineapple Grease. Subscribe and stuff. And today we're going to be talking about manga that make you cry. This is going to be sort of a strange list and mishmash of things to some extent because, one, we're going to talk about some manga that are like clearly geared to make you cry. Like the story itself is just a sad story, and the focus is definitely like on sad things, and so it's very obvious that like that's gonna make you cry. And then I have some that are like very normal, like fun manga, and then there in the middle they got stuff that is just there to that hits really hard and makes you cry out of nowhere more so those. And then I have some that are like somewhere in the middle, and then I have a couple of ones that are just kind of like depressing, and so that's a whole nother thing. So we're going to go through all of that today. So if that's exciting for you, then stay here. Yeah. But I don't know. I think like almost the ones that like, at least for me, some of the ones that are like, oh, this one makes me cry. I was dying at it are like really unexpected, I would think. Sometimes. I don't know. I've become a lot more of a crybaby when I read stuff these days than I used to be. Like, I think something about getting older, you just like start becoming more emotional, and I don't know what's up with that, and I don't know if I like it, but it's whatever. Sometimes a weird thing will just hit really hard and you'll be like, oh, it's so sad. Okay, but first we're gonna start with two that I actually didn't like very much because they're in my category of just very depressing. And so these stories are not ones that like I felt like, at least for me, they didn't make me cry, and they're not so much like sad and touching, they're more just like depressing and hopeless feeling, and so I kind of hated them to some extent. I mean, not exactly. One of them I think is maybe a surprise because it's very popular, and that's Alice in Borderland. And I didn't hate this story. Like, I really liked it. I read this, I didn't finish it, I'll be honest, but I read it back like a few years back when I had this big phase of like, I need to read all the Death Game stories and all of those. I read this one and I got really far, and it was like really fun and exciting, like how a lot of Death Game type stuff is, but then it sort of just took a turn to be like it was like exciting and like, scary, people are dying, oh no, it's sad and whatnot. But then it takes a turn where instead of feeling like there's any sort of hope in the situation, it kind of just feels like completely depressing and everything is hopeless and there's like no point to anything and everything just sucks. And it became really hard to read when it was like so hopeless. Like, I needed that little bit of hope. If everything just sucks, then that is not fun for me. It just feels depressing and like, oh well. And admittedly, I didn't finish it, so I don't know, maybe it like turns around again and becomes hopeful again, and like they do get out of there, or like somehow something good comes out of it, because it really just felt really depressing. And tell me if like the payoff at the end is worth it. Let me know. Maybe I'll go back to it and read it. But yeah, I don't like it very much. Very depressing. So if you're looking for something depressing, you can go read that. The Death Games are really cool and interesting. So yeah. And then my other one on this list of like super depressing is no, I sold my life for 10,000 yen per year, which is some like ridiculously low amount of money that he sells his life for. I don't remember what the conversion rate. I feel like it's something like $10 per year, which is like nothing. So basically his life is worthless. So because of that, he like sells off all of his life except for like 2 weeks is all that you get, or like a month or something. Like, he has like this short period of time that he gets that's something like a month or like a couple weeks, and so then he has someone that monitors him while he's doing this. And basically it just felt like the most depressing story ever. I did read the entire thing of this one, and I was going to make a book talk on it way back. Like, this was going to be one of my first book talks, and then I didn't make it for whatever reason. I don't remember. But it really frustrated me. I kind of hated this story. I thought it was really, really depressing, and I didn't like the ending. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I'm just saying it's a depressing story where it feels like, wow, his life was worth nothing, and everything sucks, and like, the world is awful, and he sucked, and then the end. So I don't really recommend it, but like, if you're looking for something depressing, it is kind of an interesting story to go through the life of some sucky person. But yeah, and if you want to hear a book talk from me about like more specifics on why I didn't like it, let me know. maybe I'll do that. This is a good time to just let me know stuff if you're like, ooh, I would like to know your thoughts on that more. Or you can put something in the comments and I'll get back to you and let you know. Because I read all the comments, I respond to all of them. Pretty good about that. So yeah, if you have something to say about it and you're like, no, you're wrong, Brittany, this is the best story ever, feel free to correct me and let me know and we can debate it or whatever. Anywho, those are my two. Super depressing. I didn't like them really. They were like too depressing and not like the right kind of sad for me. And now let's get right into like the ones that are sad and are clearly like made to be sad. And we'll generally start like lower on the list with like these ones were sad but like not as sad, and then we'll like work our way up to like sadder. Okay, so starting out, we're gonna talk about A Silent Voice, and I don't actually have the hard copy of that, so like A Silent Voice, I really like this story. I don't think I feel like it has way too much hype and it's like not that good, but it's definitely an enjoyable story and it's definitely sad. I don't remember if I actually like cried reading this story. I just know it was very sad. There were a lot of tearjerker moments and it was kind of heartbreaking. So A Silent Voice is basically about this girl who she has like hearing, she can't hear, she's deaf, and she gets bullied in school, and then the main character is the kid that bullies her, and then he ends up having like a pretty difficult life after that because all the kids kind of turn on him. And then he feels he has to go and make amends to this kid, this girl who's deaf that he bullied. And so it's kind of all about that. So it's got a lot of sad stuff and it's got a lot of heartwarming things and stuff. And I like it. It's a good one. It's not my favorite. I don't even remember if it like actually made me cry, but I remember it being like a very like sad, sweet story. And then the next one that we're going to talk about is also like really big, and I don't have a hard copy for it, but it's called Orange. You've probably heard of it. It's basically about these group of high school kids who they get this letter from they all get this letter from their future selves, and it tells them basically that they have to save this one kid in their class because he's going to die. And so it's an interesting story, and it deals a lot with things like depression and suicide, and like you don't really know what people are going through. And so I definitely like it. I definitely think it's sad. I don't feel like it had like a huge effect on me because I feel like I've already read other things that were like similar to it and did similar things but like kind of better. And also I definitely am gonna leave some of those things off this list because I just don't remember everything that I've ever read. So I'm probably forgetting things, but Orange was definitely a good story. I definitely recommend it, but it's not like the best story in the whole world. Like I feel like it's put up there as like one of the big ones because it's one of the ones in print and people see it everywhere, and I don't know how it got to be like one of the big sad stories, but it's good. You should read it. It's not the best, but it's great. The next story we're going to talk about is The Garden of Words. I also don't have a physical copy of this at the moment, but this one I actually pretty muchly enjoyed. Again, the story is very predictable, and so it's not the best. Like I've read a bunch of stories that are fairly similar to this. I didn't watch the movie, so let me know if like the movie is better or worse or anything, or if it's just like the same thing in movie form. But basically it's about this kid who on rainy days he goes to sit at this bench, and he like doesn't go to school when it rains and works on like shoes because it's his dream to do that. And then there's this like office lady that he doesn't really know who she is, and he sees her every time that he goes to this rainy spot, and they sort of build a connection, and it's pretty sad, and she's having a really hard time, and then I don't know, they sort of like work together to help overcome sad stuff. And I don't really want to get into it because I mean it's really short. It's like one volume, so it's like really short, so you can definitely just read the whole thing, or you can watch the movie. I hear it's good. I haven't seen it. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. It's not the best thing ever. Again, like I don't know, I read this story before, I feel like, so it wasn't like my favorite thing ever, but it was definitely like sad, and it definitely hit, and you were like, oh, that's so sad. Huh. So next we're gonna talk about Haru's Curse, and I actually do have a hard copy for this one. So this one, I did a whole book talk about it, so if you want to hear more about it, you should go like check that out. But basically it's about this girl who her sister dies, and then she starts dating her sister's fiance, and it like hangs over them, and there's lots of like depression and suicide-y type stuff in there, so like warnings about that. But it's a really good story, a very interesting story, and I don't know, I really liked it, and it was definitely sad. It was another one that like it never had me like full on like ugly crying or anything. It just kind of had like, it put little bit of like sniffles in my eyes, you know? But like, I didn't like full on make me cry, but it definitely was sad and it has the potential. It's a very sad story, but it's also like, it's sweet too. So I recommend you read that and go watch my book talk on it after you read it or before if you want to hear like a more in-depth explanation. All right. So next what we're going to talk about is this little story called Peace. I don't think it's out in print, so I don't have it in print and I really want it, but it looks like this and I recommend reading it. Peace is sort of a confusing story because it's all about finding all the puzzle pieces in this like issue, because it's all about this girl, the main character, who she has kind of like issues with her emotions and she's like not very emotional. She's kind of like, I don't know, she's almost like emotionless somewhat, and like she doesn't have an easy time relating to people. And so one of her classmates from high school dies and she's in college now, so it's like been a little while, and then she goes on this mission to try and find out the classmate, and it turns out she like got an abortion when she was in high school, I think, and they're trying to like find the guy that was like the baby daddy for this, and trying to like unravel stuff about her life because, you know, they want to like find out what happened to her basically. So she goes on this whole mission to do that, and then it like harkens back to her past and stuff, and like all of the main girl's issues and things, and like even the fact that she's like trying to do this kind of in a lot of ways has to do more with her and her own issues and having to like deal with stuff from her past and also stuff from her present. And like there's this guy that she likes that's kind of awful, and then he has like a whole crazy story. Like it's very crazy and all over the place. Like the mystery is a little bit like weird, but I definitely recommend it. I thought it was very sad and I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely kind of depressing, but there are like some uplifting things about it too. And it's like the mystery, some of the things are a little bit of a stretch, I will say, but I definitely recommend it. Like I think it's still a really good story. And you can find it online. It's by Hinako Ashihara, and basically just everything that everything that she's made has been really good, and I just like all of her things. They tend to all be like kind of sad, and so I love them because I love sad stories, and this story definitely made me cry. It's a good one. I recommend. You should read it. Next, this one. The next one is like heartbreaking. So next we have Watashi Tachi no Shiawase na Jiken, if that's how you say that. Or I think it's also called Our Happy Days. So this story also is not in print, but it is like so sad. Like it is the most heartbreaking story, because it's about this girl, the main girl, who it starts with her being in the hospital because she's like tried to commit suicide again, and it's not her first time. And her aunt is a nun, and she is like, hey, why don't you come and meet this guy who is on like death row, like this convict who is like basically just waiting to die. Why don't you come and meet him, and maybe that will help you and help him. So she goes and she meets this convict guy, and they sort of like develop a connection, and we hear about his life and how he's gonna die, and he doesn't know when, because he's just kind of like waiting for whenever it comes down that it's his time to die. And we hear about like why he got put in there, and we hear about like why the girl is like suicidal and what's going on, and like sort of through meeting him and him having like no hope for the future, she sort of finds that for herself, and then they like sort of provide like some happiness for each other and like lift each other up a lot. And like it's a tragic story. It's so sad. Like it's very sweet and like uplifting, but also like so depressing, and definitely a huge tearjerker. Like if you're not crying at the end of this story, you're probably a monster. But I really recommend it. Like if you're looking for that good, hard, sad story, it's pretty short. I feel like it's only like maybe 12 chapters or something, but it hits really hard. I recommend you read it. Go do that. The last story on my list of stories that are sad and are like definitely meant to be sad, that's like how they were made, is Sand Chronicles. Sand Chronicles, there's what, like 9 or 10? There's 10 volumes, I think, but maybe 10 was like an extra volume, I don't remember. But yeah, I think there's 10 volumes of Sand Chronicles. I only have 4 of them. They're kind of hard to get your hands on these days, but I love this story. It is one of my all-time favorite stories just in general, but it is so sad. It's by the same person that made Peace, but this one actually is in print, so that's nice. Hinako Ashihara. Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't really give names for the rest of them. I didn't know them off the top of my head, and I didn't write them down, so sorry. Those people were also awesome. But this one, I love her, and all her works are so sad. But Sand Chronicles is one of those ones, and I think it's partly, like, I read it at, like, the perfect time for me to read it, I think. But it just hits so hard, and it's so sad. Like, it's so, so sad. And, like, it definitely deals with stuff like suicide and like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, and depression and things. And so, like, warnings about that, and warnings about that for like a lot of these. So if you're not up for that, like, maybe don't read it. But I definitely recommend it. You go through this whole girl's life for like a huge chunk of her life. It starts when she's like 10 and some traumatic event happens to her, and then it like carries on to her life until she's like in her early-ish 20s, I think. And it goes through her life and her issues because of this like tragic event that happened to her when she was a kid, and her having to deal with that. And then also has to deal with the fact of like she's kind of raised in this small town, but then she also like moves to the city, and like whether she likes the small town life or the city life, and there's like a romance story and stuff going on. And it just mostly it has a lot to do with like her issues and her having to like deal with stuff herself, and like, oh, it's so sad. And I really recommend it, and I think it's like a really nice story, and how you get to see her life like for such a big chunk of it, because you don't really get to do that. It's like most shoujo-y type stories, it's like you get to see them for like a couple years in high school or something, and that's it. But this is really like you get to stick with her for her childhood kind of, and then all the way to her early adulthood, so you get to sort of see her grow as a whole person. And it's like, it's just really good. I definitely recommend you read it, and I really, really want to find all the physical copies because I love it so much. So I'm working on collecting those. But yeah, definitely read Sand Chronicles, one of my favorites. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to like my in-between type ones, because these are the ones that are like sad, and they're definitely meant to be sad, and that's kind of the focus. And then I have ones that are like, they're happy stories, but they have like a really sad part, or they like randomly hit you with something really sad that you don't really expect. And they just, I don't know, some of those are more surprising. So these are sort of in between, where I think they're kind of like, maybe they're meant to be sad, but then they're also like kind of not, and you're like more in between. So we're gonna start with Suiraku JK to Haijin Kiyoshi, if that's how you say that. It looks like this. This one's also not in print. It's not licensed in English. I love this story. It's a weird one because it's a student-teacher story. I definitely had a phase where I loved student-teacher stories when I was in high school and stuff. But now they're a little bit weird. But like, I still enjoy them, but they feel, it's harder to ignore the fact that they're student-teacher stories, which are sketch. I don't like that. But the story is pretty uplifting and stuff. Like, it's definitely weird because it's all based around this. It starts with this girl who, she's on top of her school roof and she's like gonna kill herself. And her teacher stops her from killing herself by basically telling her that he loves her. So then it's kind of about their weird relationship together. And her teacher is like extremely, like, he's definitely dealt with depression, and you can tell that he's like tried to kill himself like several times when he was in high school and things. And so he kind of relates to her being sort of suicidal. So like, it's definitely a very big like suicide and depression type story, but it's weirdly super light most of the time and like joking, but then it just hits you with like moments of being like really like, oh my gosh, these people are so depressed. Like, oh no, this hurts. But that almost never happens. Like, it's mostly a very like happy, light story, and it's mostly all about like, yeah, these people are depressed, but like they still have stuff to live for, and they kind of like support each other and give each other like that reason to live, and they like help make it so that they're not depressed for the most part. Like, I actually think it's like a very positive, uplifting story, even though it's kind of weird and it's told through this like student-teacher relationship, which is kind of sketch. But it's just like, I don't know. And they start like collecting a bunch of different people that are sort of like the outcast people, start becoming friends with this girl, and they like help other people too. And it's just like it tends to be a very uplifting story, which, based on the subject matter of this girl that's trying to like kill herself, you wouldn't think that it would be an uplifting story. So in some ways this is like an outlier, because I don't think it's really a tearjerker at all. Like, I think there are like a couple moments that are really sad, but for the most part it's very happy and positive. So it's a really strange story. I definitely recommend you read it. Like, it's very sweet, and it definitely has dark stuff in it though. So like, if that's gonna be a problem for you, again, like, maybe don't read it, but like, I recommend it. I actually really enjoy this story. And then, sort of in the same vein, another story that I have, that I actually have talked about this one before, so if you want to hear about that, go check out that video. I'll leave a link to it somewhere. But this is Sashihiro no One Room, or One Room of Happiness, and this is licensed now by Crunchyroll, so you can read it on Crunchyroll. It is like a very sad story too, but it also is kind of weirdly uplifting most of the time. But also it has like very sad parts in it where you're like, very sad. I don't remember if it made me cry or not, but like, it's definitely got sadness in it. But basically it's about this girl who, she's like being abused and stuff and has a really horrible life, and she gets kidnapped by this guy, and basically she like grows this really close connection with her kidnapper. And so it's sort of almost like Stockholm Syndrome type stuff, where her and her kidnapper sort of grow to like rely on each other. So it's a very weird and messed up story, and you get to learn a little bit about the kidnapper's background and stuff, and you learn about her and her background, and like, they both got a lot of issues. And so it's definitely a really interesting story. It also has like lots of suicide type stuff. I don't know, I think I just find suicide sad. So surprisingly, suicide is sad. Oh, but yeah, it hits really hard with all that stuff. So, but again, like, if that's not something that you want to read, maybe don't. But yeah, it's a really good story. Check out my book talk and that'll tell you more. But read it. The last one for this list of like in-betweeny ones is Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. I also don't have physical ones of this one yet. I really want them. I'm like working on getting them still. But this is one of my like favorite series too. And maybe it's more surprising because the other ones are like more clearly like depressing stories that maybe should more so be in the other one, but they're told generally very lightly, so they're not as sad feeling in some ways. Like, they're not as much like cry stories. They're like kind of depressing, but like weirdly also happy and uplifting. I don't know. This one is also it's like got a lot of happy stuff and a lot of fun and like, ooh, adventure and cool stuff, because it's about this girl who she meets, you know, the Hanako-kun of the toilet, who's like the seventh mystery of the school. He's the ghost that haunts the girls' bathroom. And so she sort of starts working with him to like uncover all these other mysteries and like help fix problems around the school and stuff like that. And there's all sorts of mystery stuff, but I don't want to spoil it. But at its core, it definitely has something that's like very sad and depressing. And there's one like arc that I just find so sad. It's like so sad and definitely makes you like, I don't know, at least for me, like, it made me really sad. So that arc is very sad. I want to talk about it, but like, I don't want to spoil it. But also, like, when we get into like Hanako's past and stuff, like, there's so much sad stuff in this story. There's a very core of sadness. If you want to hear me talk about it, I've been like dying to make a book talk about this, but I wanted to wait until I get like more of the books and I'll read more of the story too. I'm pretty far. I love this story. It's so sad. It has everything in it. It's got like adventures, the mysteries and stuff feel very Japanese, which is always fun, and it's got that mystery stuff to it. It's got like this very core of sadness in it, and Hanako's got sadness in his, like, his backstory is really sad. We don't know all about it yet, or at least I'm a little bit behind, so I don't know all about it yet, but there's lots, there's everything. There's a little bit of romance, there's all the things. This one is weird because I think it's a shonen, but it's like the most shoujo shonen on earth, and even the main character is a girl. Not that shonen main characters can't be girls, but like, it's a very shoujo-y shonen. Like, it's like the most shoujo shonen I've ever seen in my life, where I feel like it should be shoujo, but it's got everything. It's great. Anyone can enjoy it. Definitely read it. It's sad, but it's happy too. And those are some of my favorite stories, are the ones that are like very happy, but then they also hit you so hard and are so sad because you care about the characters so much, and then when there's sad things about them, you're like, no, the world is ending. So yes, those are my like sort of in between of like, they're kind of set up like from the core to be like sad stories, but they're also kind of not, so they don't quite fit in the other one. And yeah, all right, so moving right along, these are just some stories that are like, they're mostly very happy stories and like normal stories, but they have like a very sad part or something that randomly hit me specifically very hard, even though maybe they weren't that sad, you know what I mean? And this definitely isn't all of them, because I feel like there's stuff like that in most books and most manga. So yeah, I'm just gonna list a few. So cool. And if I forgot anything, you just let me know. And then, or if you have recommendations for like really sad stories, I love a good story that has like a nice tearjerker moment. One of the stories that I was gonna mention very, very briefly is just Fruits Basket. I'll get out this one. Fruits Basket definitely has a lot of sad stuff in it. I don't really want to get into it that much because I feel like everybody knows about Fruits Basket. But like mostly whenever sad stuff happens with Kyo, I always am like, oh, Kyo! And I'm pretty sure I've cried reading this story before, but like I don't actually really remember that much because I've read it so much now that it's like not exactly the same, and I don't have like fresh memories of when I like first read it or if that what exactly was what. But great story, definitely has sad stuff in it, but it's not like a sad story at its core. And things like her on New Year's like being all by herself for the first time after her mom dies, like it's got lots of sad stuff, but like, you know, it's a heartwarming story. I feel like everyone kind of knows that about Fruits Basket. But yeah, definitely recommend. Another one that I want to talk about just like really briefly is Imadoki, and this is another one that I haven't read this for a while, but like I've read it like a few times. I really love this story, and it definitely, I remember at the end it getting really sad for a chunk in the last volume, and I remember that hitting really hard, but like I don't really remember the specifics of it that much. But I recommend you read this story because I think it's really funny actually a lot of the time, but it also has some like sadder parts to it. I don't specifically remember them that much, so maybe it's time for me to reread this. And, you know, if you want to hear a book talk on it, let me know. I can do that. I got you. Let me explain what this one is about. It's basically about, like, I think this one was one of the ones that's basically about, like, poor girl goes to rich person school, and she meets, like, the fancy rich boy who's, like, hiding stuff, and they, like, take care of flowers together, and it's really funny. Their relationship is super funny, and yeah, I don't know. It's like a shoujo story. It has some deep stuff in it. And it has some stuff that you like don't usually see. Like there's like a teen pregnancy type story in it and stuff like that, which I feel like you don't see a lot in shoujo. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like it's definitely a good story. It's very interesting and I recommend it. It's a little older, but it's good. The next story we're going to talk about is actually like a web comic. So it's in color and stuff, and it's Chinese, and it's called Here You Are. Here it is. This story, I did a huge book talk on it a while ago. I loved it so much. And one of the things I love about it is that the sad parts in it were so hard. It's so hard with the sadness. Basically, it's shonen ai story, so it's like a romance between two boys, but it's pretty like light and not explicit. So you don't have to worry about that if you don't want to see explicit things. But it's such a sweet story and I love it, and it's got a lot of sad stuff because especially the one boy has a lot of issues because being gay isn't really accepted in society, and so like he's had a really hard life and he's got a lot of troubles with that, and that's where a lot of the sadness comes from. But like, oh, there's one scene that's so sad and it hits so hard and he was crying and I was crying. It's great. Recommend. Go watch my book talk if you want to know more. It's amazing. I recommend it. Go read it. Go watch that. Do all the things. Nice. Moving on. Okay, the next one, I've also been wanting to make a book talk of this for forever, but I don't know, since it's ongoing, I'm like, oh, do I wait until it ends in like a million years? I don't know. But I'm a little behind at this point. because when you catch up, sometimes I like to wait for a while and then I'll like go read it again. But this story is another webtoon. The last 3 are all webtoons. Isn't that funny? This one is called Who Made Me a Princess? It's one of those like I was reincarnated and my daddy is like the evil king and he hates me stories. You know what I mean? Have you read any of those? There's like a million of them. I feel like this is like one of the first ones, if not the first one. There's another one that there's actually a few that I've read like this, but this one is probably my favorite. I think it's the first one, or at least the one I read first. If it's not the first one, it's one of them. It's so good because it's all about like this girl, her relationship with her dad, and like trying to build a relationship with him. And I mean, there's like romance stuff in it too, and like all sorts of stuff. I don't really want to get into it, but there's like a moment in it near the end of where we are that's just like so sad. It makes me so sad. Oh no, I can't, it's so hard to talk about because I like can't talk about what the sad things are because they're like spoilers, of course. So yeah, but like I really recommend this story. Like I love a story that has like a good heartbreaking moment in it, and this definitely has that, and it definitely made me so sad. So I recommend you go read it, and you can tell me if you think it's really sad. You can let me know if you do, like if you know what moment I'm talking about. You can like be like, that was really sad, and let me know. But yeah, we'll just move on. Let me know if you want to have me do like a book talk on that where we can talk about it in more depth, because I'm dying to, because it's so good and so sad. It breaks my heart. Okay, moving on. Who Made Me a Princess? Good, go read it. All right, and the last story we're gonna read is maybe one of the ones that like was more like one of the most surprising ones that hit me really hard, because it hit me pretty hard like really early on, and I was just like, it's so sad. But like it doesn't even make that much sense. And that story is Villains Are Destined to Die. It's another webtoon. I think this one is on Tapas. I don't remember Who Made Me a Princess is, but this one is on Tapas, I think, is where it's licensed. It's so good. I love this story. This one is one of those ones where it's like, I got reincarnated into an Otome game or whatever. But in this one, she's like she's on hard mode, so she's like as the villain of the story basically, who's like the stepsister. And it's so tragic because so much of the story is just the fact that she's like this replacement sister because the original sister got lost. And so the dad kind of just like adopts this random girl as the sister. And it's so sad because like her brothers hate her, and she has like this horrible relationship with her family where she just like doesn't belong in the family, and the servants all hate her and everyone hates her, and it's like super depressing. And it's just like her working with the fact that like her family doesn't love her and they're her only family, and it's so sad. And I almost want to tell you what the scene is that like really broke me, because it's pretty early on and it's pretty dumb. Like I don't think it even probably is that sad to most people, but when I read it I was like, oh my goodness, it's so sad. But I don't want to spoil it for you, so like it's hard because I really want to talk about it, but like I don't want to spoil you for it. But like it broke my heart. It broke my heart so much. I was like so sad. And I think it's funny because, like, yeah, the story has a lot of sad stuff because everyone's kind of against her. And I don't know, I think I find this sort of similarly with Who Made Me a Princess. But I think I find that, like, desire to have your family love you and have them just, like, not and have hard times with your family, I find that, like, so sad. And it hits so hard because it's like you just want people to accept you and you just want to have, like, your home. And so it definitely comes from that is like the sad part has to do with that type of vibe. I guess that's all I'll say. But I really want to make a book talk for this at some point, so like if you want to hear that, let me know and I will definitely tell you the like sad part that like broke my heart so much. I'll let you know. Yeah, this was one of those ones that just like it really hit so hard, and I think it's weird that it did because overall it's not that sad of a story. Like, it's mostly, I mean, it's like got lots of depressing stuff, like I said, where it's like, it sucks that everyone hates her and her family hates her and she's like all alone and she's trying not to get like murdered basically all the time. So good. I recommend you read this story too. Villains are destined to die, and I really want to make a book talk on it now, so maybe I will. But yeah, I think that is all my stories today on, sad stories to make you cry. Do you agree with these? Because some of them are really random, some of them are like very obvious. And I definitely left some out. So like if I left something out, let me know, because I know there's more. There's things like Goodnight Pun Pun, which I know is really depressing, but I haven't read yet because I don't feel like emotionally prepared to read it yet, but I really want to. And I know there's some other sad stories that I haven't read. Give me recommendations of sad stories or of stories that are just like great stories, but then have this heartbreaking moment in them, because I love those. I love a story that has a good like, oh, my heart cracks. So yeah, let me know for sure. I'm counting on it. I want more recommendations of stories to break my heart. But yeah, so if you liked any of these stories that I liked, if you didn't like some of the stories, let me know that too. I want to hear from you. I want to know all the things. So yeah, and I hope you like this video and subscribe and stuff, and I hope you have a nice day. Okay, bye.